Hey everyone, welcome back to class. Today, we're diving into an absolutely fascinating part of early Indian history. We're looking at Class 9 History, Chapter 5, State and Society up to 1000 CE. Now, we've talked about early humans and the Indus Valley civilization before, but this right here, this is a massive shift. We're going to see exactly how small, wandering groups of people eventually built these massive, unified empires. I'll be walking you through the whole thing step by step so you're completely prepared for your CBSE exams. But before we even open our NCERT textbooks, I want you to just picture something for a second. Imagine your school without a principal. No rules, no timetable, no designated classrooms, just everyone doing whatever they want. What happens? Total chaos, right? Well, early human communities actually faced this exact same chaos. They had to figure out a system to live together peacefully. That incredible journey from a chaotic bunch of people to a highly organized society with a real government, that's literally what we're studying today. Here is our game plan for today's explainer. We're hitting the big historical questions first, then defining state and society, looking at our sources of early history, tracing the timeline and evolution, exploring some enduring ideals, and finally, we'll wrap up with a quick recap and some revision questions. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the big historical questions. This is basically the blueprint of our entire chapter. Your NCERT book gives us 4 major questions that will guide this whole journey. First, how did society and the state organize themselves prior to 1000 CE? Second, how did states actually emerge and spread across the Indian subcontinent? Third, how did concepts like Dharma and the Chakravarti Samrat create a sense of unity? And lastly, how did different social and administrative groups take shape? Just keep these in the back of your mind. By the time we're done here, you're going to be able to answer every single one of them without breaking a sweat. Moving on to Section 2, let's decode 2 fundamental words you're definitely going to be writing about in your exams: state and society. Let's break this down simply. Society is essentially a network of social relationships. It's people who share a territory and a culture, and the basic unit is the family or the household. Society runs on customs and traditions. It's kind of like your family's unwritten rules at home. Like taking off your shoes before walking inside. Now, the state, on the other hand, is an organized political system. It runs on formal, written laws and clearly defines the rights and duties of both the rulers and the subjects. If society is your home, the state is the principal's office at school, formal, structured, and built to maintain order. So, let's pause for a quick classroom question to see how these concepts connect. Do you think a state can just suddenly appear out of nowhere, completely without a society? Think about it. If there are no people living together and sharing customs, could a government with laws just magically pop into existence? The answer is an absolute no. And hey, here is a major exam tip for you. A very common mistake students make is thinking that states just existed from day one. Do not write that. Always write that state and society evolved together as communities grew larger. Because really, as groups got bigger, those unwritten family customs just weren't enough to keep the peace anymore. The state was created specifically to enforce laws as society expanded. Okay, Section 3, Sources of Early History. You might be wondering, how do historians actually know all of this happened? Well, we rely on 2 big sets of clues. First up is archaeological evidence. We're talking buildings, tools, pottery, coins, basically the physical stuff people left behind. Then we have literary sources, like texts and oral traditions. This part is huge, because while archaeology gives us the physical bones, literary sources reveal the mind and soul of ancient people. It tells us how they lived, how they governed, and what they actually believed. For example, let's talk about the Rig Veda. This is our very earliest literary source, composed way back in the Sapta Sindhu region. That's the land of the 7 rivers in the northwest. But here is the wild part. It wasn't even written down at first. It was preserved entirely through oral tradition. Generations of teachers would memorize these massive verses and recite them to students for centuries before a single word was put to paper. It's mind-blowing, and it gives us vital clues about their political and social life that a piece of ancient pottery just can't. Let's roll into Section 4, the timeline and the evolution. We're going to trace this incredible journey from tiny family groups to massive empires. Let's look closely at the timeline here. Around 2000 BCE, we're starting with kin-based polities in the Sapta Sindhu, basically groups of relatives living together. Fast forward to 1000 BCE, and we see the emergence of Janapadas, which are territory-based states. Then by 600 BCE, these grow into the much larger Mahajanapadas. And finally, by about 300 BCE, boom, we see the rise of enormous empires that control vast stretches of the subcontinent. This exact four-step evolution is something you absolutely must memorize for your test. Step 1 is the kula, or family, the most basic social unit. Step 2, multiple families come together to form a jana, which is a tribe or kin-based community led by a raja. At this stage, your identity is all about your bloodline, not a map. Step 3, as farming takes off, they settle down on a specific piece of land, becoming a janapada, or a territorial state. And Step 4, these territories expand, conquer, and grow into powerful Mahajanapadas, massive kingdoms like Magadha. Time for another classroom question. We just saw that jana means belonging to a tribe, but janapada means belonging to a specific territory. What do you think caused these roaming tribes to finally settle down, draw hard borders, and completely change how they identified themselves? Make sure you note this down. The big shift happened because of business and farming. You want to explicitly mention the growth of agriculture and the control over trade routes. Once they started farming intensively, that specific land became incredibly valuable. In fact, the word janapada literally translates to where a people first set its feet. A super common mistake here is confusing the people themselves, the jana, with the physical territory they eventually claimed, which is the janapada. Keep those two distinct. All right, diving into Section 5, the enduring ideals. These are the powerful concepts that survived even as different kings rose and fell. The first massive concept is the pan-Indian monarch. See, these early kings had serious geopolitical awareness. They didn't just want to be the boss of their local village. They wanted to rule over a huge chunk of the Indian subcontinent. They used grand terms like Jambudvipa or Bharatavasha to describe this massive, overarching territorial ambition. Now, to actually prove this supreme authority over such vast lands, powerful kings would perform the Ashvamedha Yajna. Whenever you see this term, I want you to think of the ultimate royal Vedic sacrifice. It was a massive public way for a king to flex his power and proclaim absolute sovereignty over all the other local rulers. But above all of this was the ideal of the Chakravarti Samrat. This was the vision of a universal ruler governing a massive territory. But here's the catch. A Chakravarti Samrat couldn't just be a tyrant ruling with an iron fist. They were strictly expected to rule according to Dharma. Dharma is this enduring socio-ethical principle. It's the moral code, the public duty that literally kept society balanced. Kings would come and go, but the rule of Dharma was supposed to be permanent. Let's do one more quick check on your understanding here. Think about political continuity. Did the idea of a united Indian subcontinent actually exist back in early history? Or is that just a modern invention? Oh, it absolutely existed. For your exams, please don't fall into the trap of assuming ancient kings only cared about their immediate surroundings. You can literally use terms like Ashvamedha Yajna, Chakravarti Samrat, and Jambudvipa as proof. These terms show that there was this constant, enduring aspiration for a politically integrated subcontinent. They were very aware of the bigger picture. And just like that, we're at Section 6, Recap and Revision Questions. Let's lock in everything we learned today. All right, quick 2-minute recap. We learned that society is governed by customs, while the state is a formal political system with laws, and crucially, they evolved together. Our earliest literary source is the Rig Veda, which was passed down entirely through oral tradition. We tracked the 4 steps of political evolution from the kula to the jana to the territorial janapada, all the way to massive Mahajanapadas, mostly driven by agriculture. And finally, we saw how the powerful ideal of a Chakravarti Samrat, ruling by Dharma, kept the dream of a united subcontinent alive. Now, here are 5 oral revision questions for you. 1. What is the main difference between society and state? 2. What is our earliest literary source and how was it preserved? 3. What are the 4 steps of political evolution from family to large kingdom? 4. What does the word janapada literally mean? And 5. Define a Chakravarti Samrat. Seriously, pause this explainer right now and answer these out loud. It's the best way to make sure these concepts are crystal clear. You've done a fantastic job grasping these foundations today, but I want to leave you with one final thought. If these universal ideals were so perfect, what happens when a Chakravarti Samrat's empire grows just way too massive to control? Do those empires survive, or do they completely collapse under their own weight? We are going to uncover the fate of the mighty Mauryas and Guptas in Part 2 of this explainer series. Keep studying, remember your Dharma as a student, and I'll see you in the next one.